The row, you just want to introduce yourself and your name and a little about what you do.
Hi, my name is Annie Segarra, also known as Annie Elaney on YouTube. I run a YouTube channel that is basically my personal narrative about disability, mental health, feminism, LGBT issues, and it's a good time.
Thank you, Annie. Hey, my name is Jenn Polish. I'm experimenting with J, so that's fine too. I use the pronouns, just sort of an FYI. And my first two novels just came out. One is a lesbian fairy tale where both protagonists have depression and anxiety, and the other is a queer sci-fi retelling of Peter Pan, in which just poor Peter has a lot of depression. Like me, yay! And I also have a Tumbles, and it's queer cat writing. I don't usually... Hello! Hi, sweetheart! We'll talk. My booth is 405. Come hug me. So yeah, thanks guys.
Hello, I'm CD Lee. I write queer superhero novels about a group of teens who are all queer and they take on a corrupt government agency, and there are cute robots and romance and girls kissing girls and a lot of other crazy things. And I'm in booth 205 if you want to say hi and get any of my books. I'm bipolar and bisexual, and I talk a lot about all these things on Twitter, and just I'm really open about my mental health issues, my depression and anxiety, and suicide and surviving, and just being aware and really excited to be on this call.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm a junior at Harvard University, and I'm doing research there and studying about the intersection between LGBTQ youth and mental health. And my personal story started my freshman year of college. I slowly got, actually not slowly, very quickly, got very depressed, suicidal, and ended up going to a psychiatric hospital. And after that, I realized how much stigma there is surrounding it, especially when 37 of my friends, when I initially posted on Facebook telling everyone what happened, they told me that they too struggled, and I had no idea. So I started a nonprofit called Green Ribbon Club, and we have a blog called Stopping the Stigma, in which anyone can submit their stories with battling mental health and illness.
Hi guys, my name is Zara Barrie. I am a writer and an editor. I am formerly the senior writer of the millennial website Elite Daily, but now I'm executive editor of Go Magazine, which for those of you who don't know, is a queer magazine, and print and on digital, and I've been writing about my mental health issues, among everything else, on the internet for about 10 years. And I was so afraid and so ashamed, and I remember being so scared the first time I ever wrote an article about my struggles, and then I was just amazed at the feedback that I got, and I felt so empowered by it. So now it's really my mission to connect with everybody about these issues that we shouldn't be ashamed of, because, you know, it's also reframing the way you look at it. There's a lot of gifts that come with being super tapped in. So I think we're actually the special ones.
Hi, well hello everyone. My name is Trevino. I had the amazing opportunity of being one of the first to create a LGBT Latin radio show on Dash Radio. It was able to broadcast worldwide. We were doing our show in Colombia, and Mexico, and Cuba, and a big part of why mental health was so important to myself and my partner, it was called Eating in Jacks. It not only was just so important for us to talk about, but for others to let them know like how they can get help, how they can realize their resources, and being able to use the platform to educate and let others know, like, one, you're not alone, and two, these are the tools and steps you can use to get the help that you need. With this panel being so entirely special, like everyone is here for a special reason, and again, thank you so much for coming out. We're going to get, obviously, into the main topic of this panel, but first we all kind of collectively decided that we should talk about, one, how we discovered our diagnosis, and two, how we were able to go out and reach and get the help that we needed. So those first and foremost are some of the most important things that we need to discuss with everybody, and then we're super happy to get into like all the fandom and comics and everything that is Clexacon. So first and foremost, let's talk about that, ladies, and how you came about it.
Sorry. So going into college, I really when they came by and were saying these are the mental health services, I was like, I'm not gonna need that. So it was weird for me to try to identify what was going on. And honestly, for me, and it's not gonna work out for everyone, but what helped the most was having an incredibly supportive friend group who immediately started noticing the cuts on my wrist, and immediately, I think, like one of the things that I do through my nonprofit is making sure that everyone, even if you don't have a mental illness, is educated on the topic. And I think that's why I was able to get diagnosed and be taken to resources, because my friends knew how to recognize it, and they knew the resources on campus and where to take me to it. So I honestly don't think I would be here without my friends.
So on that note, I think my story is interesting because I wish I had a support system like that. I come from, my parents are English, British, and I grew up in a very wonderful family, but very much you don't sort of talk about those things. It's not part of the culture. So I started first struggling with severe anxiety, depression, and major OCD thoughts that haunted me incessantly when I was about 15. But because I didn't have any language or knowledge about what this was, I stuffed it down and began to self-medicate with alcohol and drugs from the time I was 15. So I was in such a blur for so many years, and I just like kept trying to stuff it down and put this Band-Aid over it, and then I found myself at like 25 living in London, and it was like, I remember thinking like, it's either I die or I go to the hospital and get help. And it's so funny because I was listening to this Tori Amos song, and she goes like, I haven't seen Barbados, so like I don't want to die right now. And I remember thinking like, I haven't seen Barbados, so I'm gonna go to the hospital. So I did, and then that was the first time that, you know, then I was sent to a therapist, and she said to me, you know, I really think you've been self-medicating. What's happened to you and how you're feeling, and like, let's address this. So I called my parents, who were amazing. I moved back home for a while and spent about like 2 years like really duking it out with a therapist and like confronting, because not only, you know, do I have depression, anxiety, and OCD, but because of all the years I spent self-medicating, I put myself in so many traumatic situations. So I also had so much stuffed down trauma that I had to confront as well. But it was really amazing because I learned that the feelings I was running from they weren't gonna kill me. Like, I was so scared to feel because I thought the feelings were these monsters that could kill me, and I realized that actually running from the feelings was what was gonna kill me. If I continued to like, you know, self-medicate and self-destruct, that's what would kill me. And that really set me free, and it made me so less afraid to feel. And, you know, then it made me, and that's why it's so amazing to hear this, that you had friends that were so educated, and my friends now, like, I'm 31, so I think there has been a little bit of a shift. And my friends now, we all talk about it, but, you know, when we were teenagers, there wasn't as much information, there was a lot more stigma, so a lot of my friends really struggled, like, deep into our 20s and 30s. It was like when we began to confront it, and I just think about, like, maybe where I could be now had I confronted it at like 18 or 19. So that's what I really want to do, and that's why I'm so open, is I would like to like reach younger people and, you know, let them know.
It's so amazing because friends and or being your own support system can make such a huge difference. With mine, I didn't quite know what I was growing up with, you know, having depression, anxiety, and PTSD. I actually didn't officially become diagnosed until I went to college. Same thing, you're just kind of like, oh, I have all these resources, never gonna use them. And then there came an extreme moment during finals where I just, you know, that breaking point where you're like, I'm going to lose my mind, I'm on the edge there. So, you know, checked in, thought, why the hell not? And then I remember telling my therapist at the time, unpacking everything from my past, and him going to me and saying like, wow, I'm really surprised you're graduating, and I graduated with honors, so that was pretty awesome. Yay me! And two, he's like, I'm really surprised you're alive right now. Like, hearing somebody say, I'm really surprised you're alive right now, a doctor at my university, really is discouraging. And he's like, well, I can't help you. I need to recommend you to a professional. And I was just like, it's finals, I don't have time for this, I'm gonna put it in a nice little box and deal with it later. And eventually after graduation I did, and I was able to get help, and then I learned how to get help through my insurance, through Kaiser, through Covered California, and all those other resources that I didn't know that I had. And in doing that, it was awesome. The radio show actually developed when I was just talking about these things. It was almost like therapy for myself, and then all of a sudden callers kept coming in, and people kept tweeting, and people kept Instagramming like, hey, what you're going through, I went through. Hey, what happened to you at 15 happened to me too. Hey, how did you make it? Hey, how did you get to graduation? Hey, all these questions. And I'm like, I did it the best way that I knew that I could. So the best thing that I can do is share with you the tools that got me to where I am today. I was right there with you. I was right there at the end. I felt like I was better off dead than alive. And then now I find this platform and all of these other people who are going through the same thing that I'm going through, especially being in a Latino family, like in any multicultural family. Being crazy, seeing a therapist, you don't. It's not in the culture. It's not in the cards. It's not, you don't do it. You don't talk about it. You just deal with your problems in silence, and you smile, and everything's like, it is what it is.
I was celebrating leaving elementary school, and my dad took me out to dinner, and he said some kind of comment, like, he looked down from his menu and got real disappointed, and which sucked, because I was like in a pretty dress, pretty hair. I'm like, I'm going to middle school. He says to me, oh God, Annie, you know, one day when I make enough money, I'm gonna get you a nose job. Like, to a 10-year-old girl, it's like feeling really pretty too. You know, that's a nice example. So I was parentalized young because he turned out to be kind of an abusive father figure, and my mom was working to pay the bills. So I was kind of like raising myself a bit and raising younger siblings at the same time. So any signs of mental illness that I had weren't really being observed by any parental figures, and also because I had so much responsibility in my home, I wasn't being social, I wasn't good at making friends, so there was literally like nobody to be like, hey, you know, there might be something going on in your brain. And so when I was 12 years old, and the depression aspect of body dysmorphic disorder got really bad, and I got very suicidal, and there was a suicide attempt when I was 12 years old, and no one knew about it. Again, the whole thing was extremely isolated. It was like my experience alone, and nobody would know about it except for that fact that I'm open about it and I talk about it. So it continued to fester in isolation for such a long time, until college, when, like, by the grace of God, a professor kind of took me in her office and said, hey, I think you might not be well. And one of the biggest clues was that, so my body dysmorphic disorder made me think, kind of hallucinate whenever I looked in the mirror, that I was kind of a big caramel rhinoceros figure, and the anxiety and the dysphoria that I had, like, made it feel like every time I walked down the hallway, I felt like every single person was like holding in like their vomit at the side of me. Like, I felt just like completely ugly, completely worthless, you know, unworthy of taking up space, and that kind of resonated when I tried to go to college to perform, to be an actor. And I cast myself as the fat pig in Fat Pig, the play, for a scene routine that we had to do. I even asked the professor, I was like, should I, you know, make myself larger to play the character? Should I like stuff myself? And the professor said no. So I was like, oh, so my hallucinations are real. Yeah, my professor took me in her office and she sat me down and she said, hey, can you look in the mirror and tell yourself that you're worth it? And my eyes immediately started watering, and I went, no. I really couldn't do that. I really don't think so. And she took out a hand mirror from her desk and said, well, you're not leaving this office until you do it, which was terrifying. So like for 15 minutes I sat in my chair, I was shaking, I was crying, I was like, I really can't look myself in the eye in the mirror. Looking myself in the eye in the mirror is hard, period, because I had hallucinations whenever I looked in the mirror. And then to say something like, I'm of value or I deserve to take up space was really hard to say as well. Eventually I broke down and did it, and she encouraged me. She said, I think you need to take some time and sit with this, figure out what you want to do, and so I did. So after like 2 years of my college program, I took time off. And again, I did not have the resources or the money to get professional help, but just with that time, and then I want to encourage people too, not everyone's going to have access to that. Like I said, I was raised very isolated, so I didn't have anybody to kind of check on me. I kind of had to have my own back throughout the whole thing. And I never like really had enough money or insurance to like get professional help. So I had to, there is validity in self-diagnosis when you can, you know, catch all your symptoms and then do something like I did, which was self-therapy, in which, so I acknowledged all my symptoms, I acknowledged everything that might not be okay with me, and then I worked to battle those anxieties, to battle those fears, like step by step. And because I was doing self-therapy on myself, I could try to measure like what were my comfort zones, right? How far I could push myself before it was too much. And so it took like a good year to do that recovery process and finally kind of stabilize myself. And I found like peace within myself and gratitude and found like a really nice mental stability, and that's kind of where I am with it right now.
Amazing. I see. Just for the sake of time, do you want to lead us into what does intersectional queer media mean to you?
Sure. So when I grew up, I didn't really see a lot of myself in the media. I'm Chinese Vietnamese, and I didn't know that being queer could be a thing, that it was possible for me. And it kind of really played into a lot of my issues with self-worth and my depression. I had a lot of feelings. They didn't understand them. And then I had like a major breakdown in high school, and that led to kind of, you know, I didn't really get diagnosed until much later after resources. But I think one of the important things about being able to see characters who are going through the same struggles that you are, it's incredibly important, because I had this huge fear about what hospitalization meant, what a psychiatrist, what medication, and I was, like my first encounter was actually really intense and scary for me, and it was very traumatizing, because I was literally 16, and like they had to like, I was 5150, and it was the only like source of like, you know, forcibly hospitalized, and I was like, you know, I was, you know, trying my best to like do well in school, and I didn't fit in, and I didn't feel like I had a place in the world, and that I didn't have a value. And I remember in the inpatient care that I had all these fears and anxieties, specifically about the care itself, that had to do with like horror movies and things that I'd seen on TV about hospitalization and what it was like. But it was not like that. And I remember in group therapy that, you know, the group leader gave us a sheet of paper and was like, okay, I want you to write 3 things. Just 1, 2, 3 things you like about yourself. And I couldn't come up with anything. It was blank. And you know, after an hour, I still had 0 things to put on this page. And you know, that was part of therapy. And I think, you know, after finishing my inpatient care, and you know, it was hard. You know, I understand when all of you were talking about your families, and there's so much stigma because no one talks about it, and especially in my family, you know, being the kid of like an immigrant family who didn't necessarily understand like the culture, and also were like really, you know, they were like, hey, you gotta make us proud, you gotta do your best, we sacrificed so much to get you here, you're gonna do well in school, you're gonna, and the fact that I failed, like I dropped out like junior, senior year, and you know, was gone for like 8 months out of school, which is almost the entire school. But it was hard because a lot of my own struggle came from, you know, and I can tie it back to like the preconceptions, like what is mental health like, and then no one in my family had ever known anyone who'd ever taken medication, and the fact that I was like, well, I don't want to take this because it makes me defective, it makes me like there's something wrong with me if I have to take these medications. But and that was all that has such big to do with like how I saw myself. And then as I've learned more about myself, and as I learned that like, hey, my mental illness is part of me, it doesn't dictate who I am, it's not, it doesn't change my personality, it is merely, you know, it's like, you know, it's like if someone wears glasses, if you need to wear glasses, that's a very common disability that people have widely accepted and provided for, and you know, there's no stigma to wearing glasses, there's no stigma to thinking, hey, I need help, you know, with my vision, I'm gonna get glasses or contacts, whatever. But I feel like with mental health, it's so invisible that it's so hard to recognize that, you know, you might be needing help, and to even speak up, and you know, especially with your family, because it took like, even today, it's very hard for my parents to understand, like, to have a conversation about my mental health and what I need, and like, you know, a lot of times I'll be like with my parents, it's like, hey, like, I gotta take a minute, it's not great for me to discuss this right now, because you're hitting all of my triggers right now, or like, you know, you know, just a lot of the intersection really comes into play, especially with like, when you talk about race, when you talk about sexuality, and gender, and all of these are all twined together, and it comes back to, you know, kind of the core of this panel, which is about like representation in media, and seeing poor representation, how it affects us, and it's kind of this trickle down effect, or you know, it's a cycle of where someone sees something on TV and then they, you know, associate that with, you know, but hopefully I feel like the landscape of media is changing, where we're beginning to see more and more representation, more and more people talking about it. I'm really excited that all of you were here today to be here and just to be open about chatting about, and everyone on this panel, just hearing all of your stories about, you know, what is your journey been, and just being open and talking about it.
And what's great is that we're able to identify with anybody who has been diagnosed with mental health. You kind of know what it looks like, you know what it sounds like, you know what triggers are, you know these core words, you know what your diagnosis is: anxiety, PTSD, depression, and bipolarism, everything far and in between. So let's talk about some of the stigmas that we see in the media. Let's talk about what we know is truth on this end, and then what we see on the other end.
Well, tying that in with also the previous question, literally the research that I'm doing right now is how representation in television helps mental health of youth who identify in that way. Because my parents are in the audience right now, and I don't think I've ever told them this. I was very open with them about my mental health, and when I went to the psychiatric hospital, they came across the country and stuff. But something that is very tied in to whether you have healthy coping mechanisms. So if you aren't aware of who you are, it's a risk factor for mental health. And so during my recovery process, one of the coping skills that I found was watching Netflix, and I came across this show called Winona. And it was when I saw the representation of White Hot that I was like, that's what I want, that's who I am. And that was the first time that I recognized that I was LGBTQ, and I came out to my parents a little while ago. But finding that representation in television solidified my identity and made me know that it was okay and that there was hope. And seeing that kind of positive representation rid stigma, it rid everything, and I knew that, and like, I am happy to say I've gone a year self-harm free. So. Intersectionality in media is incredibly important, and ridding the stigma about hospitals, about care, and et cetera, et cetera. It's very important.
I wanted to ask Jenn more about your books. Yeah, yeah, because you definitely have characters who struggle with depression, anxiety, and your characters also.
They are. They are queer as hell. I do have token cishet characters, but I noticed I was very happy. For me, I think one of the things that was really funny about one of my characters, Evelyn in Lunav, so 4 years ago, I broke my own hand. I punched a mirror, and so I gave myself a boxer's fracture because that's what happens when you punch a mirror. And I needed surgery. It was around Christmas, and so I joked with my mom, who's very Catholic, that I was Jesus because I had nails in my hands. It was not cute for her. But I wanted to sort of offer a thank you to your parents because mine, they didn't know how I broke my hand. I was like, I fell. Okay. So I told them that I fell because the first time that I self-harmed as a teenager. I was screamed at, and the teachers who suggested that I went to therapy were called all kinds of names and all sorts of things. And so for me, it was funny writing Evelyn. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but whatever. When you first see Evelyn, she's also one of my readers from Tumblr drew her, and she's on like stickers and sweaters and stuff. Ooh, 405. And she actually, her hand is in a cast. And the reason her hand is in a cast in that fan art is because she too punched through a mirror. Thing is, I wrote that before I did it, and so for me, it's a lot of sort of writing characters who like, oh, Evelyn's a badass. Like, I really love this girl, and like she has her shit together, and she's this and she's that. Also, she put her hand through a mirror, and so for me. Writing that even before I did it, so it wasn't something that I was like, oh, this happened to me, I'm going to put it in my character. It happened to my character first. Life imitating art, I suppose, in an awkward way. And so for me, reflecting back on it, as I'm in the hospital and all this stuff, I'm in the hospital and I'm like, oh wait, because I was thinking to myself, like, who the hell does this? Because also the self-worth thing that a lot of people have referenced, like, my fiance does that to me, and my therapist does that to me, like, you're not getting up until you can say you're worth it, though. And I'm like, well, we gonna stay here for a while? You got a beer? Like, what? Can we, we'll just chill. So, for me, being able to sit back and, be having my surgery and say to myself, Evelyn did this too. And a character that has come to mean so much to me did this as well. Is super, super important to kind of write into existence the people that I need to see. It's trickled into fan fiction. The thing that was, I think, the most startling to me when I started tumbling with fan fiction was how many people started asking me to write. I write Supergirl fanfic, it's not obvious at all. And the amount of young queer kids who started asking me to write Alex, Supergirl's sister, as non-binary, as having depression, to write through Supergirl's trauma, to write through all these things, and different various like illnesses and mental health experiences. I'm also, I was misdiagnosed as bipolar for a long time, and then it got, I was gaslit in an abusive relationship into taking medication for being bipolar, which is not cute, when actually you have borderline personality disorder, which is the updated sort of thing that that fits me, I think, better. And so now I take other medication that I wasn't gaslit into taking. And so I think people will ask me all the time, like, hey, can you write Lena Luthor as having BPD? And I'm like, yes, I can, because so do I. And it's this thing of like, people ask me to write it, and I'm like, oh, well, that means you want to see it too. That means I'm not the only like nerd in the world who like wants to see these women who are queer and who are badasses, and who struggle with the same things that we at the table are talking about, and that a lot of us could probably talk about together. That to me, diagnosis can be, and often is, super manipulated or super whatever, and super medical industry, all this stuff, but it can also be when you're choosing it and when you're sort of proactively able to find it, or self-diagnosing when you don't have access, things like this. When you're able to do that, it can often be a community forming thing. And so for me, when she told me I was BPD, like, I was all feelings. And then I walked out of the office and I texted one of my best friends and I'm like, hey, we're BPD buddies, and that was my sort of explanation for how the psychiatrist appointment went. And so I think seeing queer characters especially is really, with mental health stuff, is really, really important. I think because also we're only typically allowed one, right? You're typically allowed to be black as a character, or you're allowed to, or in real life, or you're allowed to be queer, or you're allowed to be, have a mental health stuff. But what happens when your character is a person of color with a mental health thing and with queerness and like whatever? Like it's not as permitted, right? You get to tick one box both in life and on your fiction, and so ticking multiple boxes just feels obviously more real, and it also gets into the issues of like who is allowed to come out with mental health stuff and receive cultural support. Which bodies, which racialized bodies are allowed to do that, and then you receive support versus like shush versus oh well you have this other oppression thing, aren't you supposed to focus on that, whatever it is. And so for me it's really important to see that, because then it's like, oh, it's not just me, hooray. So
dude, thanks for all you do.
I wanted that story really moved me, because I really feel the same way when I first started writing about my mental health stuff on the internet. I remember, I was used to getting trolled because I've been writing on mainstream platforms, but I remember the first time I got trolled by, somebody in the queer community, the critique was, you're making us all look bad. Yeah. Like, you are fulfilling every stereotype that straight people have against us. And all of a sudden I felt this pressure that as a queer person on the internet, I had to be like the image of perfection. So I didn't prove that, the other side wrong, like we're not all crazy, we're not all that. But since I'm one of those people who like, I physically can't fake things, I'm just an oversharer by nature, I wasn't able to do that. And I just kept being myself. And then I realized that it's so damaging to tell somebody that they have to represent something so other people don't it's so, I think what we're missing in general, and it sounds like so many people on this panel are working to change that, is these nuanced characters. Like you said, it's like you can be one thing, you can't and I think that was also why I was so afraid to come out as obsessive compulsive disorder, my eating disorder, depression, I check off a lot of boxes. Because I thought that meant that was my only side, my only story. That was it for my life. But it's like, you know what? I can struggle with an eating disorder. I can struggle with depression. I can struggle with anxiety, panic attacks, have OCD, but also be an executive editor of a magazine who does a good job at it, and manages a team of people. Like, you can have a nuanced life. One thing doesn't have to define you. And in fact, that's what makes you interesting. What makes you interesting is all these nuances. That's what I'm interested in. So, anyway.
A lot of it has to do with diversity. Yes, please. Yes. It's amazing what can be created when you're kind of forced to. Like when you don't see yourself in something and you're waiting for someone to create you, or something that you can truly identify with. Like, that character gets me, that character looks like me, that character gets my crazy ass family, or my crazy ass friends, or my pet rabbit. Like, something in the details. Yes, I have a pet rabbit. Cannoli, and everybody on this panel knows her, she's Skyped. But stuff like that matters. In the details. But when you spend your entire life waiting for something that will never come, get up and do it yourself. get up and do everything that you can to share your story, because 100% there is somebody out there who is waiting for you. And I guarantee that is something that we have all felt, that we have all been waiting for. So it's just a matter of getting up and putting yourself out there and just trying. It was really, really hard to find a bisexual character on the radio station that can really not just connect with music the way I connect with Latin music, but also just connect with the stories and the family and the culture and being in a biracial and bisexual relationship. It's really intense and it's hard to explain your queerness when there isn't exactly a word that translates to it. So it's like, how do you say something where there isn't even a word? Will open itself up to you. You just have to try. You just really have to go out there, and then you have to come to these things and ask people, how did you do it? How did you write your book? How did you do your comic? How did you create your activism? How did you become an editor? How did you do your radio show? Ask those questions, because that's why we're here. We have the tools to help you also create more media of what we want to see, mental health representation, and in the future, obviously be great, and that's why we're here. And I hope that's all we're here.
I think one of the things Zara and Eden also touched upon is that, like, within representation, like, you know, the need for nuanced characters, one of the problems is that we don't have enough right now. Right. So on, like, there's one show, there's one character, they're the gay character. There's one show, they're, you know, this is the Asian character or whatever, but you can't, because, you know, because there's so few characters, that one person somehow has to represent everyone, and that's when you fall into the fallacy of, like, you get, like, because no community is a monolith. You know, there's, you know, in every community, there's no one person who could represent. Everyone's experience is different, and so I feel like as more people are creating their, you know, putting their stories out there, the more nuanced characters will have, the more opportunity we'll be able to see ourselves in every different level, because then you can have multiple characters on, you know, on the same show, in the same book, you know, whether, you know, you can see multiple characters with mental health issues, you can see multiple characters, multiple queer characters with different flaws and issues that they're going through.
It's not good enough just to have one. So it's our big advocate to push for not only one.
A couple of you are smirking because you see me smirking, and the reason I'm smirking is because I'm like, Cara too!
Amazing. Just kind of leading off of that, when we are pushing, obviously, everyone here to be your own content creator and to be your own voice and to be the future of mental health representation, Annie had a great question that we felt like it was really important to address before we go into open Q&A, which was how do you handle and how do you deal with the responses that come in with people who want to talk to you about mental health, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. It's how do you channel and properly handle communication coming in?
All right.
That's you.
Okay. Well, it's hard. I think everybody on this table, they do some kind of social media influencing.
Yeah, follow me.
And like and get approached a lot to talk about mental health issues. And sometimes it is extremely overwhelming. It'll come in through like a monsoon of messages and things like that. I personally, I just have to step away from the computer and like just not read certain things for a period of time. But the thing that would truly help, I think, is it is a situation, a circumstance about how you communicate with people. And I think that whether you're reaching out to somebody that you admire because of the content they create, or if you want to talk to your friend or to a parent or anybody, you kind of have to also feel out, like, are they going to be okay with receiving this kind of information? Can you trust them? Can you truly trust them with this information? And are they in a space where they're able to hear it? Because you never know when you want to talk about your mental health issues with someone that is not your therapist, if the person listening is in a mentally stable place to be hearing you out. And so you don't want to accidentally trigger them as well. You want to make sure that they're okay to hear you out, if it's okay to let them know your story. Is that all?
Well, I think the most important thing that we decided was don't you can't treat mental health like one size fits all. Everyone is very, very different. Everyone can accept people's feedback very, very differently and are open to receiving stories or testimonies. So just know who you're talking to and what they're asking for. If someone is saying, please come at me, share your stories, let me hear what you've been through, that's awesome. Please do that. If there are people who are like, hey, let me just tell you, and I'm more of a giver than a receiver, please respect that and honor that, and just don't treat everyone the same, because mental health is not one size fits all. Not everybody has the same diagnosis, not everybody has the same triggers. So just not obviously speaking on behalf of everyone, just please, I don't know, just be open to understanding who you are and who you are connecting with, because when you are asking for help, you know, we're not psychologists, unless anyone is a psychologist on this panel. We only have tools, and we can give you tools that we have learned to get to where we are today, and understand that that's what we have to offer. There are great resources that we know that we can give you guys to help and receive professional help. But again, for what we do as panelists and as content creators, we are very, very different, and we accept I don't know, I guess feedback and comments very, very differently.
Yeah, sorry. Just really quick. So my platform, I'm literally asking people, please share your stories with me, because I think that's a very important part in learning how to talk about it. And I forgot everything I was gonna say.
I kind of have this thing where the people who follow me call me their lesbian big sister. So I'm always wanting to give my big sisterly advice, but of course, like, and I really want to make this clear for people who also might like have a following or have people who come to them and ask them, you have to know, like, I always disclaim, this is my sisterly advice, and I'm not a professional, but just to always have resources. Always know when you're out of your depth. Always know when, like, this is a really, it's different if someone's like, oh my God, like, my girlfriend, I'm in love with her, but I don't know if she likes me back. Like, it's very different if it's that, or it could be a situation that could escalate into suicide. And with that, I want to make sure that I'm supportive, but I'm very careful about what advice I give, but I want to give them a resource that I know is going to really, really, really help them. Because I'm sort of here to, like, be your support system, your cheerleader, your sister, but, you know, then there is a time where it's very important to go to somebody who has gone to a school or is going to a school like Harvard to study these things. Because I just have my master's degree in mistakes, that's why.
We do want to give the floor to you guys and gals, so please, any questions?
Yes. Hey, I have a question for Jenn. There are a lot of therapists out there who are real sick of hearing about Lena Luther. And many of us on Twitter are actually really enjoying Supergirl being on break because our poor little hearts can't take it anymore. Personally, I try to cope by reading Supergirl fanfic every single night, so thank you for contributing. Do you have any other suggestions for what works?
What works in terms of?
How to stop fantasizing about felonies against just law.
It sounded clever, but I didn't hear it. I'm so sorry.
Good, because it probably forgot me right. How to deal with the fact that the show is deliberately trying to squash a very popular black show.
Oh, we're talking, of course, about... Okay. There we go. So I said it like it's funny, but to be perfectly honest, Supercore is the ship that we're talking about here. It's good. What I've been saying to people who have come by my booth, what I've been saying to people who've been coming by is I've been asking if you've seen Once Upon a Time, and then I offer condolences if they have. Because for me, what inspired me to write my novel, to write Luna, was that. It was the queer baiting and the this and the that. And I think there are two things that we do. I think the one thing, well, three things. The one thing is content creation, because we need our content. The other thing, I think, is doing, quite frankly, I mean, this came from queer baiting, from lesbian death, and from all this stuff. And so I think continuing to do things like this, and to be really vocal about that, and there's no heterosexual explanation for how they look at each other. But I think the third thing, and I got this a lot when Alex and Maggie broke up, but I also, for me, Supercore is actually even more painful, because I think they wrote it bad with Alex and Maggie, but I think that with Cara and Lena, it's me. It feels to me cruel. because they know it's there, and they keep putting it in there, and then blah, blah. And so to me, it feels cruel. And so for me, even if it doesn't feel cruel to someone, that's totally okay. But for me, the comforting of people, of like, hey, it's totally okay that you've been in bed all weekend crying about this, that to me is really, really important.
Hi, babe. I'm so sorry. I don't want to like cut you off. Just one. At least we want to get one more question in. I know we can talk forever about it. Does anybody else have a question? Yes.
I have a question for what are resources if someone doesn't struggle with mental health to be able to educate themselves if somebody in their life does.
NAMI.org, N-A-M-I, National Alliance of Mental Illnesses. It's great resources. They have classes, they have group brochures, they have things you can read about how to help your loved one, what you can learn. They have support groups specifically for loved ones where you can meet if you're a friend, if you're a family member, where you can talk about what is the best way to support this person that I love that's going through this. And they're a national organization, so you can just go to their website, find a local chapter, and they have mentors, they have a lot of great resources. Also DBSA.org, Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, is also a great resource. And Green Ribbon Club. Sorry, I'm a super course, I've got 4 of them. Yeah, Green Ribbon Club, where a lot of people are sharing their stories, www.greenribbonclub.com. Org.
Does anyone else have one last quick